Okay, welcome to my mostly spoiler-free review of Pandemic Legacy, and specifically an explanation of what makes Pandemic Legacy Season 1 different from your average Pandemic board game. Now, they're pretty much the same game, but obviously Pandemic Legacy is an expansion and introduces an entirely new meta narrative to the game that just makes it orders of magnitude cooler, more creative, and a lot more fun to play. Now, this is mostly a spoiler-free review. I will review a couple things that happened in the first couple turns of the game, mostly because that's as far as I've gotten into the game, but also because I don't want to give away too much for those who are going to buy the game, which, if you're at all a fan of Pandemic, I highly recommend Pandemic Legacy. So here is, for comparison purposes, the regular Pandemic game. So anybody who's played this game will be familiar with this setup. This is what the average board looks like, and you see the regular board with your infection deck, your player deck. Here's where you keep track of the status of your diseases. The rule book for this game, pretty straightforward. If you've played the game at all, you've reviewed it, there's a few pages to the game, not that much to it. You have your action reminder cards, which remind you the 8 type of actions that a player can take, and those are the only actions a player can take. And here are your player cards that tell you, well, they pretty much just tell you what the players can do, and that's really all there is to them, because that's all the information they need to convey. Well, take that basic game structure you have for Pandemic and take that into a whole nother dimension here with Pandemic Legacy. So you compare the two boards. One's a bit bigger than the other, 3 panels instead of 2. The layout of the two boards, very similar. It's the exact same board, essentially. It's the exact same layout, the same number of cities, everything else. You're starting off with the same basic game, just a little bit larger, and that's to accommodate the things that will happen during the course of the game. You might notice a couple physical differences to the board, this one that you're looking at here. I'll explain what those are. They certainly don't start that way. The beginning of the game, when you start this game, it's exactly the same as your average board for Pandemic. So what makes this different? Well, you'll see that, first of all, the board is broken down into months. So January through December. And the idea is a group of players get together and play this game over and over, like they would regularly if you're a fan of the game, but these subsequent games are changed and altered based on what happened in previous games. And the group of characters gets together and play each month. If you win the month, January, for example, you go on to the next month. If you lose the month, you actually get a chance to play it over again. If you lose the second time, you go on to the second month anyway, but the idea is you want to try and win each month. And got your same diseases and everything else here, but what makes this game a little bit different, first of all, your characters. So you compare these character cards, for example. Here you've got your original researcher card, just tells you what they can do. You see they're the exact same powers. The researcher has the same function in each version of the game, but there's a lot more to her. So each character has their own dossier, a little booklet here that you get to write in. You keep track of wins and losses and when you played each month. Each character can substitute out in subsequent versions of the game, subsequent planes of the game, and they develop actual characteristics that are individual to that character. So in addition to having her built-in abilities, the researcher now gains relationships, for example. So relationships are something that you can build with other characters in the game. You can upgrade skill levels for each character, and each character can incur scars, and I'll talk for a minute about how that happens. But there's a lot more personality instead of just a role and abilities to the character. It really fleshes out each character with specific abilities that they can do. Well, how do these abilities come about? Well, there's an extra feature to Pandemic Legacy that the other game does not have, and that is the Legacy deck. Now, I'm not going to show you the specific cards in this Legacy deck because what the cards say and the order that you draw them in make a big difference here in how the game is played. But suffice to say, you start drawing Legacy cards from this Legacy deck as soon as the game starts to be played, and they very quickly make a difference in how the game plays out. Up here you see a feature of the board that isn't present in other versions. That's called objectives. So your first objective that you place here, and which stays there in every subsequent month, is to do exactly what you do in a normal pandemic game, which is discover the cures for the diseases. And each version, each iteration of the game, each time you play the game, you still have to do that, which is the basic goal of each game of pandemic. You want to cure the diseases that are spreading around the world. There's just more to it in subsequent months. And early on, here's your first minor spoiler, and this is something you'll discover quickly if you play the game. Minor spoiler, first round of the game, first month you play in January, something bad happens with respect to one of the diseases. The disease mutates, and it becomes more difficult to treat, and things go crazy from there. So in our game, it happened to be yellow. It's completely random how that happens. I won't tell you how that happens, but you'll see here a sticker, and I'm not going to focus on that sticker to tell you what that is. There's actually been subsequent stickers added to this board, and that leads me to one of the things that makes this game, this Legacy idea, completely different from any other board game that I've ever played in my life, and that is each time you play the game, you are making physical alterations to the board itself, such that subsequent planes of the game will be permanently affected by how you've played the game in the past with those same characters, and those changes stay and they're permanent. So once you get to the end of the game, the end of the series of the games in December here, you're done with this board. This board, you just can't pull it out and play it again because it's been so physically altered. Now again, what you see here, and to the extent that you're able to sneak any revelations out of what I've got here on the board, which are going to be very minor, but me and my group of players, we've only gotten through March so far, so I expect there's going to be a lot more alteration to this board before the game is actually played out. But at the end of every game, the group of players gets to choose 2 game end upgrades. Now those game end upgrades could be any one of a number of things that you can choose. So for example, a pandemic player will know that you often want to build research stations on different cities on the map while you're playing the game. Well, one of the upgrades you can choose is a permanent research station. So for example, the first time we played, we built a research station here in this city, and we decided, you know what, we'd always like there to be a research station here. So one of the things we could choose was this permanent little white sticker here. It looks like a research station. So now every time we play this game after that, there's automatically a research station that starts there at the beginning of the game. You'll see we built one here as well, and now we've got them pretty much covering the map. You'll see some other stickers here jumping out. Little number stickers by, well, what are now several of the cities. These represent outbreaks and panic levels specifically. So you'll see here, cities have increasing levels of panic. This happens every time there is an outbreak in the city. So the first time that happens, it's just a panic level of 1. It's unstable, doesn't change the way the game plays, but it's a concern. And then in subsequent games, it doesn't matter if it's another month down the road, but any other time that an outbreak happens in that city, in any other subsequent plane of the game, you increase that panic level. That panic level never goes down. Why? Because it's represented here by a permanent sticker. You see this permanent sticker, number 1. There's always going to be a number 1 in Los Angeles because there was an outbreak there one time when we played the game. So same here in Mexico City. You see here in Bogota, there's a number 2. Well, what does that mean? That means an outbreak has happened here twice in the course of playing this game over and over again. Well, that means the city is in now a riot. That limits, and you can read here what the rules are, but basically it limits your ability to get into that city. It makes it increasingly difficult to get into that city the more often than an outbreak happens. And having already played this game maybe 6 times now, getting through the month of March, We have a 2 sticker here in Bogota. There's a couple over here in Asia, and there is one in Riyadh here, really starting to add up. So I have a real fear that by the time we get halfway through this year, there are going to be cities that are actually falling, and that makes it a lot more difficult to solve the game in subsequent planes. Now, other game end upgrades, these riots obviously are things you don't want to happen, but other game end upgrades you can choose. Positive changes to the game are, for example, improvements on being able to cure specific diseases. And you'll see that my playing group has really focused on these abilities to be able to solve these diseases, cure these diseases a little bit more easily. I won't spend a lot of time on that. If you're really interested, go back and zoom on that, but I will try to spoil it as little as possible for you. Some subsequent cards in this legacy deck, you're turning them over and it'll tell you do this halfway through March, for example, or halfway through February, or after you've cured your second disease in a particular month. It tells you very specifically. There's a very well-designed, well-thought-out chronology to when you're drawing these legacy cards. And sometimes you get particular bonuses if you win a month. You'll see here we won in March, so it gives us a bonus in April. When we play the game next, that's where we've left off. And if you don't win that month, well, maybe you don't get that bonus. But there's more that happens when these legacy decks get played out. So, for example, there's some characters here that were in that legacy deck. One of the cards we would turn over would be a particular character dossier folded up. We'd open it up, and there you go. You've got another character that you can now play, that you get to choose from in subsequent versions of the game. This idea of him having relationships, for example, character relationships are not something that happens immediately in the game. Sometimes what will happen is the legacy decks will tell you to open this top secret folder, and within this top secret folder there are a number of numbered or lettered subcompartments. You'll see we've opened several of them already. It'll say, for example, we drew a legacy card that says open Windows 16. Well, we'll peel back Windows 16 and there might be a set of stickers there that we apply to the board. Or what's really cool is the rule book. So compared to that 4-page rule book that comes with the normal game, this one's a bit more complicated, a bit more to do in this. And you see here, when the idea of relationships was introduced into the game, we're actually peeling a sticker out of this top secret folder and putting it right here into the rule book itself. There's an actual space for that rule to be added when the legacy deck wants you to do that. Now you'll see here in my rule book, for example, there are all sorts of blank spaces for rules that have not yet been implemented, haven't been discovered yet. So the game itself and even the rules of playing the game changes as you continue playing the game. Rule sticker F here, for example, has yet to be determined, and this is under movement actions. So we've got your standard 4 ways to move a character, and there's another rule there yet to be built. So apparently, at some point in the game, we're going to discover in this top secret file another way to move characters. I don't know what that is, and I can't wait to find out. Here are the action cards. So I showed you earlier the regular action card that you have to determine how a character is moved. Here's the same one. You see this one's colored to go with the particular character of that color icon. Well, in your legacy deck, when there are new ways to move, new actions that are introduced, you actually have colored action cards that go with this that tell the character, remind the players, new ways to move now based on these new rules. So here you'll see quarantines, new spoiler here, and again, a very minor spoiler. These are things you're going to determine and discover very quickly when you start opening the game. Quarantine is an action that gets introduced in the game. It's a lot of fun. Military bases are a piece that gets introduced. So instead of just building research stations, for example, now you can build a different type of structure, one that's known as a military base. And while you're thinking, well, how do I have these military pieces? Do I just have to come up with my own piece to represent a military base? Well, no, because in addition to this top secret folder, another resource that's introduced in the game, here's the box itself, are these 8 black boxes. Another thing that this top secret file can tell you is, okay, open up black box number 1 or 2, for example, and you'll see that 1 and 2 are the only ones we've added so far. Well, in one of those boxes, you've got a military base. So now it looks exactly like a research station, except it's green. Now you have the option to build those as well, and you can follow the rules that it'll tell you about to figure out how to build those. You'll see some quarantine tokens in here, which again, I won't tell you more about than I have to right now, other than to say that they're another piece that can be introduced into the game. There's a fun one here that fortunately I haven't had to open yet. It says here, only open this box if you lose 4 games in a row. Hopefully I'll never have to open that box, but maybe that's a lifeline that keeps you going even after that happens. Here you'll see the sticker sheet that comes with the game, and never since I've been in my adult years have I had so much fun playing with stickers, I'll tell you that. And these are not only the riot indicators, so you'll see here, you know, the 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s that I showed you earlier that you can place on cities where outbreaks occur. But then you have the game end upgrades as well. See that here, game end upgrades that you can choose from. Again, whether you win or lose the game, you get 2 of these that you can choose from at the end of the game. So positive mutations for diseases, for example, right here. And we've chosen a lot of those, and I showed you. So in addition to positive mutations, for example, there are character upgrades, a few of which I've chosen already to add to some of our characters. Unfunded events, these are an interesting thing where you can take these stickers and add them to a city card so that, for example, this one, a city card becomes also an event card, which you can use either as a city or as an event, and with different options and rules that come along during the course of the game. Unfunded has particular meaning because in this game your funding level determines how many event cards are in your deck, and you'll learn more about what funding levels mean when you pick up the game. There's the starting research stations we mentioned, for example, and scars. I mentioned when you have these character dossiers, you can add scars to a particular character. What this means is negative events that happen to a particular character, specifically if they are in a city when an outbreak occurs or something bad occurs. They actually get damaged, and you need to choose one of these scar stickers, which reduce their abilities in some way. And if you get more scars on a character, then they have spaces for that on the little card, on the little dossier. That character is lost, is what it's called. And that character is no longer usable in the game. You have to use somebody else. And as you go through the legacy deck, you'll see here new game end upgrades, new stickers that can be added to the game, and just more options to expand it and make it more and more personalized. So by this point in March, you know, you're not going to find 2 games that look exactly the same. You're not going to find a board that has exactly the same combination of stickers that my particular group has one. So every game gets more and more personalized as you go on. It just makes it really fun, really interesting to play, and adds a new level and dimension of strategy to the game, because you're not just playing for one game. You're not just playing to cure 4 diseases, for example, and then be done with the game. You have to think long term. You have to think how your choices, even how your stickers that you choose, choices that you make at the end of the game and making upgrades after it's all over, will affect subsequent planes of the game. So that is really, to me, just an amazing feature. Apparently there is one other Legacy game out there, Legacy Risk, which after having played this far into Pandemic Legacy, I'm really interested to go see what that's all about. But that's what Pandemic Legacy is all about. Again, I've only given you minor peeks into some of the first things that happen in the course of the opening months of the game. I can't show you more because I haven't gotten there, but I can't wait to. And I guess I'll close on the thing that happened at the end of our last game in March, of the game going into the month of April into the game. And you'll see here on Los Angeles, there's a particular sticker there that's different than the rest of the game. What does that sticker mean? What does that little biohazard symbol mean there? Why is that there on that particular city? Well, I'm not going to answer that question. You've got to pick up the game and play it for yourself. And trust me, if you are at all interested in games like this, which really who isn't, you won't regret playing Pandemic Legacy.